Thank you, Provost Stern. Thank you all. Thank you for being here. As my accent reveals, I'm not Irish. Welcome all. Welcome to the series. Welcome to this particular one. It's a difficult one. I'm delighted to see that we have many participating in such a difficult topic. And I want to share with you the fact that I am particularly touched by George Mason motto, by freedom and learning, because I do believe that in the end, if we have a chance of having a genocide prevention system emerging, it's going to be around freedom and learning. Genocide, in fact, occurs in closed exclusionary human system, and I will speak tonight about some of the understanding that is emerging around this concept and the way in which we can move forward. But let's go back for a moment. When we speak about genocide, when we speak about prevention, when we speak about what is coming, we need to go first back to the moment. And I would like to go back to Kristallnacht, to November 9, 1938, a moment in which genocide comes together, when something happened that is qualitatively different. Ideas are not just vague, they become behavior. Hypotheses become plans, things happen, occur. What many do not realize, and I'm actually delighted that Provost Stearns asked me to speak and that I could choose the topic and the date of my speaking, because 10 years and 1 month after Kristallnacht, the UN approved the International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, December 9, 1948, 60 years tomorrow. So tonight, we are here taken in the tension of the two moments, taken in the paradox of prevention, in the paradox that says to us that only what we know can be prevented. What we do not, how could we? And this is why the link with freedom and learning is so key. And this is why having a word like genocide, having a concept, having an idea, help us to operationalize what it takes for that never to happen again. After those 10 years and millions of deaths, we were given a name, a word, a task to prevent genocide. As a human family, we did not do well enough. We did not well enough in preventing genocide in Cambodia, in Rwanda, in Congo, in Sudan, in the Balkans. We are still not doing well enough. And we must come to terms with the awareness that somewhere, somehow, a human heart as yours and mine is playing with genocide. He's thinking that genocide may not be bad. That genocide is actually doable, possible. We must come to terms with the awareness that somewhere, somehow, a human mind as yours and mine is planning a genocide. While we were thinking genocide as trains and gas chambers, thinking of Kristallnacht and the 10 years that were after that, it took the form of machetes and mob violence. It changed dramatically, so that many were discussing not of Hutu and Tutsi, but Tutu and Hutsi. Who are they? What are they doing? Why are they doing these things? What is this? Is this a genocide? What is it really occurring? What is happening? The frames we were using were in a way hiding us from seeing what was in reality coming. While we were thinking genocide at the past one, someone somewhere is planning the new one, maybe a nuclear one. So I hope that you don't mind my disturbing talk and the invitation tonight to take genocide prevention seriously. I'm here to share good news, I promise, with my Italian accent. Good news. And share the pride of George Mason University and ICAR in particular in this leadership effort to serve conceptualizing, executing, and sustaining a genocide prevention system. But before we get there, we must face some hard realities. Mr. William Brown. Racial tensions were at an extreme in Omaha in the summer of 1919. The influx of African Americans from the South and a perceived epidemic of crime created an atmosphere of mistrust and fear. On September 25th, a white woman, Agnes Lubeck, reported that she was assaulted by a black man. That evening, the police took a suspect to the Lubeck home. Agnes identified a black packing house worker named Willie Brown as the assailant. Mr. Brown was 41 years old and suffered from acute rheumatism. When police arrested him on September 28, a mob quickly formed, which ignored orders from the authorities that they dispersed. When Mayor Edward Smith appeared to plead for calm, he was kidnapped by the mob, hung to a trolley pole, and nearly killed before police were able to cut him down. The rampaging mob set the courthouse prison on fire and seized Mr. Brown. He was hung from a lamppost, mutilated, and his body riddled with bullets, then burned. 4 other people were killed and 50 wounded before troops were able to restore order. We can say that it was only one. That it was long ago, that we were not there, that they were evil, that we know better, that one dead body is not a genocide. Or we could say that even one is enough. That one is already too much. That justice was not done that night or afterwards. That we are still ashamed and feel close to Mr. Brown. That each person should be defended by us all. That Mr. Brown's rights were violated and disfigured as his body was. We could also say that we feel for the 4 others and the 50 wounded, for the 4 others who died and the 50 wounded in those days trying to restore order. And that we appreciate the courage of the mayor who risked his life to stop the mob. Let's treasure tonight, in the silence of our heart, the occasion that is given to us to stop for a moment, free and open to learning, honoring Mr. Brown, encountering him at the time of his passing, remembering with him all those who suffered at the hand of another human. Tonight, I think of George Mason, an owner of slaves and the writer of the Virginia Bill of Rights, hoping in my heart that he would rejoice at the news of an American president-elect as black as Mr. Brown because of the political institution and the legal protection that he helped establish. Tonight, I'm thankful for all human institutions that have preserved freedom and learning for all of us. There is where the source of a genocide prevention system is. So what is genocide? This is what the convention signed 60 years ago says. That genocide is any of the following acts committed with the intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, religious group as such, killing members of that group, causing serious bodily and mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction, in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent birth within the group, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. So as we can see, genocide is not a riot. It's not an occasional killing. It's not an accident. It doesn't happen just because it happened. It's not a crash that happened in the moment without nobody knowing. Genocide is intentional, selective, collective, and sustained. And I insist that these are 4 beautiful words. Beautiful words. But humans are curious. We can take a plane that is not supposed to be a weapon after all and slam it into a building and kill a few thousand people, transforming something beautiful into a weapon. The same way we are able to transform something beautiful as intentional, something beautiful as selective, something beautiful as collective and sustained into something completely horrifying. Genocide is intentional because the targeted victims are identified, capacity to kill them is secured, and the strategies to execute are tried and improved. Genocide is selective because it separates victims from perpetrators, potential victims from possible perpetrators, but victims from those who could help them. Genocide is collective because so far no individual has been able to kill the multitudes alone. Genocide is sustained because violence must continue over time and across space to be genocidal. Genocide is a human experience that transforms good gift in death promises. Genocide is an intentional, selective, collective, and sustained human experience. I insist on the paradox of the goodness because, after all, we should not forget that inter amwe, the main actors in the Rwanda genocide, means those who work together. I'm sure that Provost Stearns is telling all of us to work together quite often, not exactly to do a genocide. To speak about genocide, then, is to speak about human intentionality, pathologically constrained and distorted human intentionality, but nevertheless, always. To speak about genocide prevention is to speak about human responsibility, committed, open to verification, human responsibility. The locus of genocide is in the human mind first, because dead bodies follow the misleading certainty of death as envisaged by a troubled and constrained mind. You must think before you act. You don't invent a genocide on the spot. There is a moment in which you are preparing yourself and many others, and then crystal knocks come. And that's when you really start learning. That's when you really start trying what you thought was just an idea, just something possible, but in many ways removed. The execution of genocide is a complex task that requires sustained intentionality and 3 conditions: motivation, capacity, and conducive environment. If you have motivation but no capacity, you have no genocide. You just have hate speech. If you have capacity but no motivation, you have no genocide. But if you have motivation and capacity and the environment is not conducive, you don't have a genocide. You have arrests, you have responses, you have state institutions that are able to thwart what you are planning to do, because that's not right, it's not legal, it's not possible. You need to have the three together to have a genocide. The International Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide assumes the motivation, but doesn't focus on capacity and conducive environment for the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide. It was approved by the UN the day before the signing of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights, but not much was done afterwards. Think for a moment the completely different trajectory of the two documents. Think how much we know about human rights. Think how many institutions are dedicated to human rights. Think how many hours of work have been dedicated to human rights. And in comparison, how little, how almost irrelevant genocide prevention has been so far. Time has come to do more. Genocide is a form of perceived yet unverified certainty. Genocide is not a product of conflict per se, but is frequently present in the moment in which conflict exists. It is a chosen behavior of a group perceiving an extreme threat. We fall and remain in conflict because we care. But we fall and remain in conflict because we try to make sense of the world as we know it. And yet, genocidaires convince themselves of the certainty of the threat, then they act out the killings. What happens in a genocidal mind is that the threat becomes certain. There is no learning, there is no freedom, there is no way to move beyond the certainty of death. We all put boundaries where it makes sense to us in order to survive and thrive. Within those boundaries, we resist anything or anyone who is a threat, real or perceived, to our existence as we know it. We push back. Get up. Get out of my lawn. I don't have you here. But the genocidal mind goes further, much further, and thinks, if they exist, if you exist, we don't. There is a link that is much more bounded and constrained, and moves the whole human system in the direction of confrontation, exclusion, hostility, and elimination. So genocide is a product of exclusionary coherence. If this, then, there is no other way. The dynamics that precipitate genocide are produced and chosen when someone refuses to ask, is this so? There is certainty. It's very clear. There is no one able to ask, is this so? Or, is this good? Because genocide emerges in the mind but is executed in actuality, we have to pay attention to the improper use of words and realities. And actually, good news, the first one after a long part of a difficult talk, is that, I don't know how many of you know, but when Juan Mendes, at that time in charge of the Genocide Prevention Office at the United Nations, special advisor to Kofi Annan, realized that in Ivory Coast, the state-controlled media was inciting genocide using hate speech. He picked up the phone, called President Gbagbo and said, remember that of those crimes in the convention, incitement is a crime. We do have an international criminal court now, and if this doesn't happen, if you don't stop your media campaign, things can move on. One day later, the campaign stopped in Ivory Coast. It's a small sign, but it's a sign that we can learn, that when we open ourselves to the learning and the stern advice of somebody, something good happens in human system. All perpetrators learn while doing the genocide because someone else is not telling what Juan Mendes said to President Gbagbo. This is why it is always possible, theoretically, to prevent, respond, contain, and protect. If a state intervenes properly and promptly, the probability of an actual genocide is close to zero. The state plays a very relevant role in genocide prevention, because what distinguishes a genocide from a riot, a program, a lynching, is that the killings are sustained over time and space, and that they are intentional, selective, and collective. This is achieved through the role of a political structure, like a state, that condones, supports, and or execute the killings. So it is when you have that moment that really genocides start happening, but also happen when there are no other political structure that intervene. When nobody intervenes, then you do have a conducive environment. This is why Kristallnacht is so central. That night, the genocide came together, and no one responded to it the way it should have been. There was no effective response. Genocide is possible only when states are either dysfunctional or hyper-controlling. And the genocide violence is monodirectional, doesn't encounter resistance. The defense of the victims and the potential victims should be secured by functioning institutions. After 60 years since the convention, we are finally building both policies and institutions. So when should we intervene? I like these slides. We all intervene all the time because we are the system. And if we do not respond, we neglect. If we neglect, we are co-responsible. And this is why I came up with this idea, this engaging government on genocide prevention that we're going to have at George Mason in January. It builds around a simple idea that institutions of higher learning, especially in the United States, have a convening power, and that states are actually more malleable than people realize, and that you can engage them, you can invite them. And so we decided to invite intelligence officers, military personnel, diplomats from all 192 countries to think operationally genocide prevention. It is truly an expression of freedom and learning, and it is done in a university setting. EGGP aims at supporting all 192 UN member states to be openly and effectively anti-genocidal. It doesn't single out the ones that are problematic. It says the system must be global and must involve everyone. It doesn't matter if Sweden is already doing something. Sweden can do more. Sweden should come and discuss with the others what the next steps are. And there is a sense of urgency that people perceive when they participate in this kind of learning opportunities, that the victim is acted upon by the perpetrator, that in many narratives, the perpetrators themselves put themselves in a defensive posture. They must be eliminated because otherwise we will suffer terribly. They are the embodiment of evil, of threat, of danger. To eliminate them is a duty for a genocidal mind. The enemy is so pervasive, dangerous, and threatening that action must be taken to eliminate them all. Yet the enemy must be powerless enough not to respond. So that's the key element. And this is why when people come to these trainings, they realize the importance of a collective institutional engagement that will say to no one, it is okay to make others victims because no one is going to respond. For the genocidaire, they can only be made victims. For the genocidaire, even the identity of them being victim is rejected. They are cockroach, criminals, subhumans. They don't exist. They have nothing to say. They are bound by the victim paradox. If they confess, they confirm. But if they resist, they confirm too. The genocidaire knows very well that the victim is powerless, that is only to be acted upon by the power of those who can. The only radical way out of genocide is to move beyond victimhood for anyone. It is to conquer all states to an intentional, selective, collective, and sustained action for the prevention and punishment of the crime of genocide, one by one. Every state is different. Italy is not Spain. Mongolia is not Malaysia. Every single state is going to confront their own past and the violence and the massacres that were there in their own memory. But the path has been now cleared in front of us. We debate about conflict being good or not, war being moral or not, violence being effective or not, but no one can claim that genocide is good, moral, and effective. This is what happened 60 years ago. It's a great achievement. It's a great achievement of learning. The convention 60 years ago was a starting point. Much has to be done. Maybe through these words and your presence, something was done tonight. This morning, the Task Force on the Prevention of Genocide issued its report. This is an initiative done by the United States Institute of Peace. I was encouraging and done with the Holocaust Memorial Museum and the American Academy of Diplomacy. And in June, George Mason will welcome for the first time the International Association of Genocide Scholars coming for their convention in Washington. We are making progress. We are moving in the right direction. Thousands of students and young activists have committed themselves to genocide prevention through GNET and other organizations. Enough, Save Darfur, Stand. And have shown that there is a constituency for genocide prevention. All UN member states, not only those involved in genocide or at least, should become actively anti-genocidal and are invited to be part of EGGP. This capacity grows with the acceptance of a shared narrative of human suffering. Before the convention in 1948, we had the killings, and we know very well now, especially with Ben Kietan's work, that humans kill others for a long time in a genocidal way, in a genocidal form. But we didn't have the name to describe it together. The reality that the Nazi called final solution was named and redefined as genocide, a crime against humanity. Genocide is a crime against the humanity of each of us. Genocide is a crime against yours and mine, as well as the humanity of the victims and the perpetrators. Facing genocidal solution based on enmity, all states are confronted with the responsibility to respond. The Genocide Convention articulates one of the ultimate horizon of our shared, one and only human family. Human rights are an attempt to articulate human suffering as a shared experience. All humans suffer the same, whether freedom is violated, whether dignity and rights are not recognized. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights gave all states an inescapable formulation of human suffering. Genocide is the exact reverse. To prevent genocide is an act of responsibility, individually and collectively. Even mine, even just as a scholar, there is something that I could do, and I could see the capacity of that initiative to be synergistic with the initiative of many. And that includes states in the effort to motivate, create capacity, and a conducive environment. Our knowing makes us responsible. To keep states anti-genocidal is to keep, in my view, them true to their mandate. To keep states anti-genocidal is to help them to come to terms with their past. When we welcome ourselves again, in our common humanity, in freedom and learning, we will be confident that the genocide prevention system is not only emerging, but sustainable. Thank you.